If our government comes from the consent of the people who are governed, then that means we're responsible for what government does. It's being done in our name. And the question is, if government has a monopoly on force, which I believe that's the definition of government, they have a monopoly on force. Everything government does is done at some level with the threat of a gun behind it. Now, when I speak to groups that aren't free market groups, I have to spend a lot of time explaining that government is violence. I'll skip over that whole section. So the question comes down to, and this is what changed me, the only things I can ask the government to do are the things that I myself would do if I had a gun and I knew justice. And the questions become very, very simple to me then. Because the question, would you use a gun to stop a murder? Well, you know, that's assuming I can tell that it's really a murder that's happening, which I'm not sure I can. I'm not sure I could tell that from vigorous CPR, but assuming I know that. And assuming I had a gun, which although I use it in our show and do a big bit on the Second Amendment, I don't actually carry. But assuming I had a gun, and assuming I'm not, that I weren't a coward, which I am. I'm not the one up here that's a decorated Marine helicopter pilot. Remember, I'm the one who's carny trash. Would I use a gun to stop a murder? Yes. Would I use a gun to stop a rape? Well, if I hadn't read about it in Rolling Stone, yes. Would I use a gun to protect personal property? Oh, man. Yeah, I would. Would I use a gun to build a library? I'm from a dead factory town in western Massachusetts, a poor town, Greenfield, Massachusetts. And I'm wicked old, 60 years old. I grew up before the internet. And I went to a terrible, terrible public school. But I've been 3 times redundant there. Terrible, terrible school. I didn't know jack. So I went to the library all the time. The library really, really mattered to me. The library is where I first read Kafka and Allen Ginsberg, because Frank Zappa told me to. It's where I first heard Stravinsky and Verez. It's where I first heard Alban Berg and Stockhausen. It's where I first learned about magic and juggling and religion, which for those of you who remember the Dewey Decimal System are all in the 900s. And man, I loved that library. I got on my bike and I rode there all the time. Frank Zappa said, skip the senior prom and go to the library if you've got any guts. Precisely what I did. But would I use a gun to build a library? Well, you know, I'd put up my money to build a library. I'd beg you to put up money for a library. But would I point a gun at someone and say, we're taking your tax money to build a library? Would I do that? No, I wouldn't. And that to me is right where we go down the line. I love NASA. When Neil Armstrong walked on the moon, I cried so hard that I'm still crying now when I say Neil Armstrong walked on the moon. No, I wouldn't. That's got to be done privately. And you know, I like crazy, crazy art. I like art that I bet everybody in this room hates. There was an artist named David Warnerowitz who got his NEA grants pulled in the 80s because NEA grants pulled because his stuff was very anti-Catholic and very pro-gay. And they pulled the NEA money from him. And he was one of my favorite artists. And my reaction when he lost his NEA grant was, I was living in New York at the time. I went to his studio and I bought a lot of his work because I figured he just lost his grant, needs money, probably be cheap. Would I use a gun for art? No, I wouldn't. I'd get rid of the NEA because now we have Kickstarter, Indiegogo. We don't need it. They're more efficient. They're more honest, and they don't use force. They don't use guns. We do not use guns. I don't care how unpopular this is. I listen to NPR. I like Terry Gross. I like all that stuff a lot. But man, the fact that it's done at gunpoint makes me sick. And I don't care if it's only 2% or 1%. Guns do not belong in art. And when Penn and Teller were asked to play a series at a show, a series at a theater that was all done with NEA grants, we wouldn't do it. Because our show is too goddamn good. And if I need to point a gun at you to get you to come to my show, I need to find a different job. So that's how I became a libertarian. And I became a libertarian nut. And I go on TV and I say things that are very, very unpopular. Like I say that I'm against gay marriage. And before anyone applauds at that, I follow that with, I'm against straight marriage. I don't know why the government gets involved in my love life. I love my wife and my children more than anything in the world. And the fact that the government got involved in that doesn't make it more sacred. It makes it obscene. And the only reason we're married is because I could not find a lawyer in Nevada who would promise me that if we signed a contract and dotted all our I's and crossed all our T's and spent a metric shit ton of money, they could guarantee that if something happened to my wife, I would get custody of our children if her family went crazy. And it wasn't clear that I could visit her in the hospital. So yes, I am against gay marriage and straight marriage, but until we can get rid of that and get the government out of that stuff, we gotta allow freedom for all people. And the people that I fight for the most, the people that I argue for the most, are the Westboro Baptist Church. Because they are nuts on the other side. And if I have any doubt about their right to say what they want to say, all I am doing is shutting myself up. And those of us who are atheists and are people that don't have faith, we are fighting for the rights of people who want to have faith, for people who want to believe, because that is what liberty is about. I have a very simple definition of liberty. Liberty is the freedom to be stupid. No one needs freedom to do the smart thing. We need freedom to be stupid. I have never had a drink of alcohol or a recreational drug in my life. Right now, that means I'm banned from Colorado. I did not inhale. I said, get that joint away from me, you stupid hippie. I was so afraid that if I had one toke of marijuana, I would want to listen to the Grateful Dead, and I couldn't bear that. I was so afraid that if I had a drink of alcohol, I would listen to Garth Brooks. So I stayed away from all that stuff. But I will not tell you right now, I cannot tell you that I think my life has had better choices than Jim Morrison, who died at 28 in the Doors. I don't know that it's better to live a life as long as I have so far, totally sober, than it is to do heroin and die really young. I don't know what's best for other people. And I want other people to have the right to be stupid. I want to fight for that freedom. And I stand here before you now, knowing that many of you do not agree with me, to beg you, as you grow in power, and as John and all the other wonderful people here tonight help you get your point across, please remember that there are nuts and whack jobs and creeps and freaks who disagree with you, but need you more than anything to fight for the right to be stupid and crazy. Thank you so much for letting a cheap carny trash come here. Thanks so much. Peace.